So jumping into the case study a little bit, as a background, the wildfire problem around the world is increasing. Human development in the wild and urban interface is on the rise. We have more and more populations kind of in that mixed region of development structures, as well as those beautiful landscapes that we like to hike and walk through. People build homes in those areas, and so that's a real problem. At the same time, we're seeing less and less land management by farmers and agriculture. A lot of lands are being left to fallow, especially in Portugal. That's the case. So there's a buildup of fuels in the environment, and really 50 years of suppression activities have led to a buildup of fuels in the environment. So in the United States here, what that looks like is a substantial increase in the national burned area averages dating back from the 80s until today. So you can just see that chart kind of ramping up as a steady increase towards around 10 million acres a year. Some estimates place for the US that we should be burning about 8 to 12 million acres a year. And obviously, historically, that was a lot lower due to effective suppression. But what we're also seeing in tandem with the increase of burned area is an increase in wildfire suppression cost. So these are figures in the billions. We're spending upwards of $2 to $4 billion a year. And the increase in spending is not having an impact on how many acres are burned. So we're unable to contain these mega fires. They continue to increase in size and damage and have financial impacts, as well as environmental impacts, destroying watersheds and the assets and unfortunately communities that we live in. So it's time for kind of a new approach. There's an opportunity here for technology to help track and manage, and we'll discuss a little bit of that. So in Portugal, kind of moving outside of the US for a moment, the environment looks very similar to Southern California. So if you haven't been to the Mediterranean region, there's a lot of dry fuels, kind of that chaparral or grass ecosystem, open pine forests where you have light flashy fuels on the forest floor, as well as pretty volatile forests that have been evolved to deal with fire and live with fire on a pretty regular basis. There's also a lot of eucalyptus forest in Portugal as well. So any kind of stories that you've heard of California and the wildfire danger there, you can apply to Portugal as well. So what that lends to are very fast moving fires that don't persist for a long time. So a lot of the fires are quite short. I think the average fire in Portugal lasts for about 4 to 5 days. And that's a stark contrast with these long campaign fires that we have in different ecosystems in the United States, especially in the Pacific Northwest or in more water plentiful regions like Alaska. The fires tend to get in deep, get into root systems, get into peat bogs, and kind of go underground, where they're very, very difficult to mop up and put out. So one advantage of working in these kind of light, flashy fuel ecosystems is that the fires tend to be short-lived. So Portugal is investing in technology. They're investing in policy. They're investing in the way that they fight fires. And so they gave us a call through the AGIF organization to ask us to come out and do a demonstration and a technology trial of our real-time intelligence systems in order to help them combat this problem. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the technology and the mission to Portugal. So the camera system is a combination of multispectral imagers operating in the visible spectrum, near infrared spectrum, as well as the thermal infrared spectrum. So those are red, green, and blue bands, near IR band, as well as a long wave thermal sensor. So that data is pulled onto an aircraft where there's an edge processing environment. So GPUs, CPUs, kind of threaded processing environment to be able to rapidly distill that information, those raw kind of rasters and pixels into geospatial products. So we create orthophotos. So those are composite images of many hundreds of images stilled down into a single file. So that gives you a very broad area view of the fire, kind of seeing the entire environment. It's georeferenced as well as ortho-rectified. So it's corrected for the terrain, and it's put into a coordinate system which can be immediately shared in mapping software. It can be shared with users. It's easy and simple enough to use on some smartphones. You can use kind of Google Earth. You can use Avenza, like as a geo PDF. But the goal here is really to get it out to as many people as possible, right? There's such great forecasting for hurricanes, for storms, for especially East Coast storms have just fantastic models around where the storm center is going to be, when's it going to reach landfall, and that's shared very publicly. You see weather forecasters kind of on the TV showing and talking about these probability scenarios. And the same thing really isn't true for fire. Like, we just don't have the sophistication, the ability to predict where a fire is going to go with some degree of certainty. There's a lot of factors as to why that's the case. Fires are pretty unpredictable. Winds change. The environment changes pretty rapidly. That kind of affects the fire's behavior. But what we're trying to do is really get that information in real time out to as many people as possible. So this is a real image that you're seeing here that we collected on this mission to Portugal. You can see, active fire fronts kind of working left and right. You can see some staging areas as well as some roads, and there's some power lines in the corner as well. So this is typically a difficult environment to kind of get your bearings in. So aircraft are used quite a bit. So I'll play a demo here, and what you're viewing is the user interface for the Overwatch system, and it's sped up a little bit so you guys don't have to bear with us as we fly from one airport to a fire 2 hours away. But you'll get a sense of what's happening kind of up in the aircraft without getting seasick at all, or airsick rather. So this is a rapid fire mapping workflow. So this is kind of in the initial attack phase. You can start here with a lat-long coordinate of a report of smoke or a known location of a fire. Paste that into the user interface, and you'll get a hit on the map. Now you kind of know where to fly to with the pilot. So you ferry over to the fire, fly towards it. And here the system will be initializing. So what you're seeing there is a heat threshold, which is a vectorization of the heat on the ground. That's just an initial reconnaissance flight. So you can see that there's indeed fire at this location. We've confirmed there's a fire. So from here, rather than spend a bunch of time, bringing in an agency personnel to come up with a management plan, the aircraft is just going to double back and do a more comprehensive site assessment. So we'll do multiple flight lines at an optimized altitude. So this is a flight planner tool that you can use to set up your aerial survey. So it looks like the pilot would like to fly more north-south on this one. And you can send that flight plan over to the autopilot, or in this case, the human pilot. And then you'll fly back and forth in that grid pattern, kind of mowing the lawn, so to speak, to be able to collect an area of the entire fire. So at this point, you've covered the whole fire, and you can see the fire perimeter there. Kind of busy on the map. There's a lot of things going on. For illustration purposes, we've brought this into ARC, but you can see the fire's location. This is the long wave thermal raster. You can see it looks a lot like a satellite image, like VIIRS or MODIS would produce, but at about 1 meter resolution. So you can see all the hot spots. You can see the fire line. You can see that perimeter shape. We use a computer vision algorithm to generate that fire perimeter, and those two products are able to be shared off the aircraft. Overwatch Imaging uses GeoServer for that. We have a web map service, web map tile service that we can publish those data sets to directly from the aircraft. And then from there, they get distributed out to authenticated users who have the credentials to access it. So that could be the civil protection authorities, that could be firefighters on the ground, that could be anyone who has the capacity to see that. And you can bring it into different GIS front ends. So if you're using ARC, it can be attached as a network link. If you're just out on the ground, you can just request the vector products, which are nice and lightweight and don't require a big data connection to download all of those raster images. So after that fire, that was about 10 a.m. in the morning, we circled back to a fire from the previous day. And on the screen right now, you can see this is an old fire scar. The lighter gray areas of the map are previously burn zones. So what you're looking at is a fire outbreak on the southern flank. To the right side of your screen, there's a town interface community there. And this is a fire from a couple days ago that it was mostly out. The firefighters did a great job of getting 99% of the heat put out. But unfortunately, there was this, single point of heat along the southern border there. And then you have a breakout fire. And that obviously, has the potential to undo a whole bunch of work that's taken many, many people several days to do. And it has the potential to reignite and break out and threaten that community again. And so the value of remote sensing is the ability to, especially thermal remote sensing in the case of fire, is to give firefighters, a sense of certainty that although they've looked and don't think there's any heat there, you have this kind of second system to ensure that you're right. You can fly over the area and pinpoint all of the heat. Obviously, that's spatially referenced. Once it's vectorized, you kind of get you can put points or lines on a map, and then all of that can be shared quite rapidly. So you can try to prevent things like this from happening. So in terms of the case study, why would an agency, invest in an aircraft, invest in remote sensing equipment, as well as the, IT systems required to do a project like this? Like, these are fairly, technologically advanced things. So when it comes time to Portugal, in Portugal's case, majority of fires are small and flashy, take under a week to control. So the goal of this program is to reduce the time spent putting it out. That's called the mop-up phase, by 1 day. And why that, it doesn't seem like a lofty goal. If you could reduce a 3-day fire by a day, that's a 33% savings. If you can reduce a 5-day fire by day, that's a 20% savings. So when you're talking about 20 and 50% or 30% savings, like, that ends up being billions of dollars to the United States. Crews are available sooner, they come back to base sooner, they're able to reset and respond to new incidents. And typically when you have bad fires, there's many happening at once. So you're always kind of resource constrained, and there's always kind of the need for more firefighters. So a little bit of simple math here. This is a probability of what happens when you have hotspots around a fire's edge. So let's assume we have a detection rate of 70% and a spread rate of 98%. So every hotspot that you do not detect will spread and create another hotspot. And we're going to look once a day. So that's the interval. If you start with 1,000 hotspots and you're only getting 70% of them every day that you might expect on a typical walk around the edge of the fire, at the end of day 9 or 10 days into the event, you will not have put out that fire. There's going to be hotspots remaining. As you increase your detection rate to 80%, you can see that figure goes down to 0 by day 9. Increasing that figure to 90% means that you hit extinguishing of that fire by day 5. So we've halved the time on the fire just by having a better detection rate for hotspots. And that's only at 90%. It's conceivable with technology that you get up to 98, 99%, which would obviously put the fire out a lot quicker. When we look at the effect of the interval, how many times a day do you check? If you're walking and you need to go around the perimeter of a fire, you can probably only do it once a day. You're going to be a lot slower. By using an aircraft, you can do that a lot faster. So what's the effect of interval on the time it takes to put out a fire? You can see with the same scenario, you get to a extinguish 0 hotspots by day 8, and by you can see the effect is quite strong there. So if you're detecting 98% of hotspots, sorry, 90% of hotspots, and you're doing it twice a day, you extinguish that fire by day 3. So you can see there's a very strong effect of your ability to detect heat and the frequency at which you put them out. So really the value of these systems for kind of real-time decision support for emergency responders is about cost avoidance. In the case of fire, we want to avoid risk. We want to avoid breakout events from happening, and we want to be able to use our resources as efficiently as possible. So, wildfires are extremely costly, extremely complex. There is no answer to the wildfire problem. I think sometimes we fall into a bit of a trap thinking that we can just like solve that problem. Whereas, you would never like say the same thing about hurricanes. Like we can't just like solve the hurricane. You can't stop it. But the data has a lot of value here. It's something which is a little new to the firefighting industry, but we hope that they'll adopt more strongly as this technology becomes more available. So that's all I have today. Again, Overwatch Imaging. My name's Gregory Denton. If you want to contact me, email's pretty simple, gregory@overwatchimaging.com. So I'll turn it over to my fellow speaker or back to Ryan now. And thanks everyone for the time today.